It's not Halloween, but the White House wants to scare you anyhow about what the automatic budget cuts will do to you in various states. They've targeted Virginia. They've targeted all the District of Columbia. And a new report has been released by the administration showing how these cuts will hit, as I say, each state.
But critics are saying that it's just another tactic to scare Americans and put pressure on Republicans to make a deal. Ephraim Graham has the story.
The budget cuts kick in at the end of this week, trimming less than 2.5% from federal spending. Still, the White House spent the weekend sending a frightening message to American people.
Once these cuts take effect, thousands of teachers and educators will be laid off, and tens of thousands of parents will have to scramble to find child care for their kids.
You're going to be delayed. It's going to have a real impact. Calamity, very painful. This is a big deal.
All of those things come from reduced numbers of people fighting fires, engaging in air traffic control. I mean, those are just the facts.
And in a move to get holdout lawmakers to compromise or face unhappy constituents, the president released a state-by-state report about the sequester's impact. It highlights Virginia could see about 90,000 civilians furloughed in the Department of Defense. Ohio will lose more than $25 million in funding for primary and secondary education, putting more than 300 teachers' jobs at risk. And Arizona would lose more than $1 million that provides meals for seniors. One Republican group fired back with an ad, painting the White House tactics as extreme.
Well, this is hardship on a whole lot of people, seniors, middle-class families. It's a bad idea, a bad idea.
Management by crisis is getting old. The crisis doesn't look real anymore.
Senator John McCain said, quote, "I won't put all the blame on the president, but the president leads. The president should be calling us over somewhere, Camp David, the White House, somewhere, and us sitting down and trying to avert these cuts."
They have plenty of flexibility in terms of discretion on how they spend money. There's easy ways to cut this money that the American people will never feel.
The question is, why won't he work with us? And the answer, quite simply, is because he wants higher taxes.
The president does maintain Republicans are not willing to raise taxes on the wealthy, and their response remains they already did that at the beginning of the year. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Well, the bottom line is the president wants a fight. He wants a fight because that's the way they win elections in Chicago, and he's a Chicago street organizer. So that's, you get a fight, and you demonize the other party, and then you trample on him, and hopefully you win. That's not a way to make a deal if you really want to make a deal, and obviously he doesn't want to make a deal. So, but this is nonsense. These sequesters. There's so much waste and fraud in the government. They can cut 2% out of that without any trouble. But instead of that, planes are going to fall out of the sky. The forests are going to burst into flame. The children aren't going to be fed hot lunches. It's just going to be chaos. No, it's a scare tactic. Well, another hot political topic in Washington is back in the news again. Guess what? Gun control. Lee Webb has an interesting story that was released by the Justice Department.
That's right, Pat. The National Rifle Association is attacking the Obama administration for a memo from the Justice Department. The NRA says the memo shows that the administration does not believe its gun control plans will work unless the government seizes weapons and requires national gun registration. The memo questions how effective gun control measures can be by themselves. The Justice Department, however, says the memo does not represent official policy. Meanwhile, a group of black leaders is speaking out against the idea of new gun control laws. Paul Strand has that story.
As the victims of the most gun violence, you'd think African Americans might be leading the charge for more gun control. But these black leaders come together at the National Press Club said no. What's needed are more guns in the hands of law-abiding black citizens. Two of Niger Innis's brothers were shot to death.
They were murdered by criminals who didn't pay attention to gun laws. And they were murdered in communities, the South Bronx and in Harlem, in cities that had the strictest gun control laws.
Innis says probably the only thing that could have saved his brothers would have been good citizens with guns.
Cops can't be everywhere at all times. And the first line of defense often in these circumstances, particularly in these communities, are good people with guns, good people that can defend their communities and their family.
Star Parker points out 41% of whites say they have guns, but only 16% of blacks.
Blacks are the least armed, least protected and defended, and the most assaulted citizens in our country.
For these leaders, the big issue here is protecting citizens' constitutional rights and the Constitution itself.
Light gives us ways that we can step correctly. The Constitution to the United States is the light that allows us to walk consistently and constantly.
Seattle pastor Ken Hutcherson has suffered from bone cancer for the last 4.5 years.
And the pain oftentimes is unbearable. But I came from Seattle to be here because this issue is a lot more important than my health.
African Americans remember a long history of whites controlling them with gun control and Jim Crow laws.
A lot of these so-called gun control laws were nothing more than people control laws.
Parker points out in many black communities,
It's not only the criminals in power, but we've had a history where the law can't be trusted.
So these leaders say what's needed is better armed good people and less of an assault on the Second Amendment. Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Yeah, Pat, in fact, Star Parker was getting at the intent of the Second Amendment in that soundbite we just heard from her.
It was excellent. And by the way, I misspoke. The Justice Department didn't release that. This was a memo that they prepared, and it was released by the NRA. But it just shows the truth. If you're going to control guns, you've got to confiscate them all, and that's what they want to do. And if they can't do it, then they're not going to have so-called gun control, but we don't want gun control, and these black leaders said it very well. These poor people need to defend themselves against bad people. And by the way, speaking of defending yourself, Hollywood has once again defended itself by giving an award to a motion picture that said Hollywood is the champion of the rights of man, called Argo. It was put out by Ben Affleck as a producer, and it had to do with a film crew going into Iran to rescue some hostages, and that won the Oscar, very heavily watched piece of film. And did you watch any of that?
Last night?
Yes.
Yes. I
did you? What struck you?
That the First Lady, I guess, gave part of the award or made the announcement. Bizarre.
Yeah, one blog I saw said First Lady crashes party. I mean, they had her.
It was really, I didn't get it. I mean, I thought it was kind of odd all of a sudden without any.
Well, the 15 minutes of stand-up at the beginning came out a little bit lame, too. They had some pretty flashy stuff, but I tell you, glitz and glamour, but it's Hollywood. You know, Brokeback Mountain won, 2 homosexual cowboys, and then they have Argo, which is a film crew from Hollywood doing a heroic thing, and Hollywood says, look at this, yay, we'll give them the award. But anyway, I'm glad Ben Affleck, he's sort of been an also-ran in many of these categories, and it's nice to see him win one. All right, Lee.
Pat, the Defense Department's decision to end the ban on women in combat may open the door to women being drafted into military service. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled more than 3 decades ago that only men 18 to 25 should be included in the draft. But legal experts and military historians say the law could be changed now that frontline infantry, armor, artillery, and special operations jobs are open to women. Women have never been drafted into military service before in this country, but a Defense Department report is due in the coming weeks that will assess the legal impact of lifting the ban on women in combat on draft registration. And I will have a special report on the debate over women in combat in just a few minutes, Pat.
Well, I look forward to it. My father served in political office for, half a century or more, and the joke in Washington is that temperance and prohibition was the reward of the hypocrites. And I think what we're seeing now is the draft of women will be a reward of the feminists. They will finally get to see what it's like. And I don't think most women don't want to be drafted into the Army, do they?
Well, I wouldn't think so, but you know, you're right that has been an issue for several decades now.
Well, it's been pushed by feminists. I mean, why would they want their sisters to be involved in blood and gore and the horror of battle? We've always wanted to protect the feminine persona and give them a special place, put them on a pedestal. give honor to the weaker vessel, the Bible says. Well, they're not going to get any more honor if they get drafted along with everybody else. You know, I tell you, that's the way it is. Lee.
The U.S. and Europe will launch a mission to see if they can knock an asteroid out of its orbit. The plan is to see if it's possible to save Earth from a deadly asteroid in the future by pushing it off course. It's never been done before, but the idea did gain strength after the largest meteor to hit Earth in a century exploded over Russia, over Siberia, just over a week ago. The mission is still in the planning stages and will not be launched until 2022. Well, Jimmy Johnson took the checkered flag at the Daytona 500 Sunday. It was the second time he's won the Super Bowl of stock car racing. None of the mishaps Sunday, fortunately, approached the size of the wreck that injured more than 24 fans Saturday. Daytona International Speedway workers were up until 2 a.m. Sunday repairing the fence that was damaged in that accident. After the race, Johnson gave a shout out to the fans and said his thoughts and prayers were with everyone who was injured in the grandstands on Saturday. Danica Patrick, by the way, finished 8th in the Daytona 500 after winning the pole position a week ago. She was right up there in the top 10 and, in fact, led a lap at one point, Pat. She did pretty well yesterday.
Well, I was pulling for her. I'm not for drafting women, but I'm certainly glad to see women in the draft in the in the Daytona. She got teammates to draft with her because they like her. She's a nice lady.
She's a very nice lady.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we'll see lots more of her.
Oh,
in the
you
future.
better believe it. She's a star.
Israel and the U.S. have successfully tested an anti-missile system to defend Israel from an Iranian strike. Israel's defense ministry says the joint exercise was a major milestone in the development of the Arrow 3 weapons system. The Arrow is produced jointly by Israel Aerospace Industries as well as Boeing. It detects an incoming missile and destroys it with a second missile. Iran's Shabab ballistic missile can carry a nuclear warhead, and it can easily reach Israel. CBN International provided medical help to more than 300,000 people in Cambodia. The aid came during a 5-day medical outreach in 4 remote villages. CBN gave free medical and dental care to adults and children and distributed more than 1,200 free sets of eyeglasses. These medical events give CBN a chance to share the love of Jesus. More than 700 adults and nearly 300 children professed faith in Jesus Christ as a result of that mission. And you can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international.